He was seconds away from losing everything. His freedom, his name, his entire life. The judge had already begun the final words that would send him to prison for years. But then, two tiny girls in torn clothes burst into the courtroom, screaming that he was innocent. In their shaking hands, a broken phone. And inside that phone, a truth so devastating, it shattered everything he believed about love, family, and trust. If stories about truth, sacrifice, and second chances move your heart, take a moment to subscribe, because this one will stay with you long after it ends. It all started with a man who believed in building futures, not destroying lives. Asher Donovan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. He let out a slow breath, studying his reflection. At 40, he had the look of a man who had earned everything the hard way. A few gray strands had begun to show at his temples, but his eyes still carried that same determination he had back when he was just a young engineer with nothing but dreams. Today wasn't just another day. Today, he was about to sign the biggest contract of his life. Behind him, the soft sound of footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor. "You're going to wear that tie into the ground if you keep fixing it," Claire said gently. Asher turned, and just like every time he looked at her, something inside him softened. Claire had a way of doing that. Her blonde hair rested perfectly over her shoulders, and her smile. It wasn't just beautiful, it was comforting. Like home. "Just making sure everything's right," he said with a small smile. "Big day." She stepped closer and straightened the tie herself, her fingers brushing lightly against his chest. "You've been preparing for this your whole life. You're ready." He believed her. He always did. Claire had been there from the beginning. When his bank account barely covered rent, when his dreams felt bigger than his reality. She never complained. Never doubted him. Or at least, that's what he believed. "The Horizon Complex," Asher murmured, almost to himself. 500 homes. 5,000 people getting a real place to live. Claire smiled and kissed his cheek. "And you're the man who's going to give it to them." That mattered more to him than the money. Because Asher Donovan wasn't just a rich man. He was a man who remembered what it felt like to have nothing. When he walked into his office later that morning, the city stretched out below him like a map of everything he had built. Towers, schools, homes. Pieces of his life standing tall in concrete and steel. And waiting near the reception desk was Elijah. "Elijah, you're early," Asher said with a laugh. Elijah grinned, that same relaxed, confident grin he'd had since college. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that contract. They had been best friends for over 15 years. Brothers, really. Where Asher was cautious and detail-focused, Elijah was bold and instinct-driven. Together, they had built something strong, something real. Or so Asher thought. Inside the office, Elijah placed a thick folder on the desk. "Everything's ready. City approved it yesterday. This is it." Asher opened the folder slowly, flipping through the pages. Legal terms, figures, signatures waiting to be written. $52 million. But that wasn't what made his heart race. It was the responsibility. "This isn't just construction," Asher said quietly. "This is people's lives." Elijah leaned back in his chair. "And that's why we're the ones doing it." An hour later, inside City Hall, Asher held the pen in his hand. The mayor had already signed. Now it was his turn. For a brief moment, everything felt still, like the world was waiting. And then he signed. Just like that, the deal was sealed. On the drive back, Asher couldn't stop smiling. "Claire's going to be so happy." "And we're just getting started," Elijah added. "Monday, we move full speed." Back at the office, everything became a blur of calls, plans, and schedules. Workers were assigned. Materials ordered. Deadlines set. By the time Asher got home that night, The sun had already disappeared behind the horizon. But inside, warmth was waiting. Candles flickered on the table. Soft music played in the background. Claire stood there with a glass of wine in her hand, smiling like she had been waiting all day for this moment. "We're celebrating," she said. And for a while, everything felt perfect. They talked about the future, about families who would finally have homes, about children who would grow up in safe neighborhoods. Later, as they sat outside under the quiet sky, Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not just building buildings," she whispered. "You're changing lives." Asher closed his eyes, holding her hand. This was what it was all about. But the next morning, something felt off. Standing at the construction site, watching trucks unload materials, Asher narrowed his eyes slightly. The cement looked different. Lighter. Weaker. "Marcos," he called out. "What brand is this?" The engineer hesitated. Elijah switched suppliers. Said he got a better deal. Asher frowned. A better deal? He picked up a handful of the material, rubbing it between his fingers. It didn't feel right. Later that day, he found Elijah in the office. "Some of the materials, they don't look up to our standard," Asher said carefully. Elijah didn't even look up from his computer. "Relax, brother. Everything's within spec." Asher stood there for a moment, uneasy, because for the first time in years, he felt something he had never felt before. Doubt. Doubt. The word sat heavy in Asher's chest as he stood there, watching Elijah scroll through numbers like nothing in the world had changed. 4 years, he had trusted this man without question. Signed papers without reading every line. Agreed to decisions without second-guessing. That kind of trust didn't come easy. It was built over time, through late nights, shared struggles, and victories that felt like they belonged to both of them. So why now? Why did something feel wrong? "You sure everything's been checked?" Asher asked again, softer this time. Elijah finally looked up, a faint smile on his face. "You think I'd risk our biggest project over cheap materials?" It was said lightly, almost joking. But something in his tone didn't sit right. Asher forced a small nod. "No, of course not." And just like that, he pushed the feeling aside. Because trust, once built that deep, doesn't break in a moment. It cracks slowly. The weeks passed, and the Horizon complex began to rise. Concrete turned into structure. Structure turned into buildings. Workers moved like clockwork, schedules stayed tight, and on paper, everything looked perfect. But Asher saw things others didn't. Small cracks appearing too early. Pipes leaking during pressure tests. Frames that didn't align the way they should. Little things. Things that could be explained away. Normal issues, Elijah would say every time. Happens on every site. And every time, Asher tried to believe him. But belief was getting harder. One evening, after another long day, Asher sat behind the wheel of his car, waiting at a red light. The city buzzed around him. People rushing home, lights flickering on, life moving forward. Then he noticed a man standing near the corner. Worn-out clothes. Tired eyes. A paper cup in his hand. A poor man, maybe in his 50s. Asher rolled down his window and reached into his pocket. "Here," he said, handing over a few bills. The man's face softened instantly. "Thank you, sir." "God bless you." Asher gave a small nod. "Take care." But before the light changed, the man spoke again. "They say they're building new housing nearby, for people like us." Asher's hand tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "They are," he replied. The man smiled, a quiet kind of hope in his eyes. "Maybe one day, I won't have to sleep outside anymore." The light turned green. Asher drove forward. But something about that moment stayed with him. That project wasn't just numbers and deadlines. It was people. Real people. People who had nothing, holding on to hope. That night, when he got home, Claire was waiting in the living room, curled up on the couch. She looked up the moment he walked in. "Long day." "Yeah," he said, loosening his tie. She shifted closer, resting her head gently against his shoulder. "You're doing something good, you know that?" He stared ahead for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I just want to make sure it stays good." Claire tilted her head slightly, studying him. "What do you mean?" Asher hesitated. For a second, he thought about telling her everything. The materials, the small issues, the feeling in his gut. But instead, he just smiled faintly. "Just pressure, I guess." She reached up and touched his face. "You've handled worse. You always do." He leaned into her touch. Because hearing that, it made things easier. Or at least, it made him ignore what didn't feel right. Days turned into weeks, and the project moved forward. But beneath the surface, something else was moving too. Something Asher couldn't see. Something already set in motion. One morning, just before sunrise, the quiet of the house was shattered by a sharp knock at the door. Then another. Louder. More urgent. Asher's eyes snapped open. For a moment, he lay still, confused, trying to make sense of the sound. Beside him, Claire stirred. "Who's knocking at this hour?" "I don't know," he muttered, already getting out of bed. The knocking came again. Harder this time. Asher pulled on a robe and headed downstairs, his heartbeat picking up for reasons he couldn't explain. Something felt wrong. When he reached the door, he paused for a second, his hand hovering over the handle. Then he opened it. 3 people stood outside. 2 men in dark suits, and a woman holding a folder. The taller man stepped forward, flashing a badge. "Mr. Asher Donovan?" Asher blinked, confused. "Yes. What's this about?" "I'm Detective Morrison." "This is Detective Santos. We need you to come with us." Asher frowned. "Come with you? Why?" The woman opened the folder and glanced at the documents inside. "Mr. Donovan," she said calmly, "you are under investigation for financial misconduct related to the Horizon Complex project." For a second, the words didn't register. Then they hit all at once. "What?" Asher let out a short, disbelieving breath. "That's not possible. There's been a mistake." Morrison's expression didn't change. "We have records of unauthorized transfers totaling $8.5 million. The number echoed in the air. 8.5 million. Asher felt like the ground had just disappeared beneath his feet. "That's insane," he said, his voice shaking now. "I didn't take anything." "Sir," Santos said firmly, "we have a warrant for your arrest." Behind him, he heard footsteps rushing down the stairs. "Asher," Claire's voice, filled with panic. He turned slightly, his face pale. "They're saying I stole money from the project." Her eyes widened in shock. "What? That's crazy. You'd never do that." "I know," he said, almost whispering. "I know." Morrison glanced at his watch. "Sir, we need you to get dressed." Asher stood frozen for a moment. Everything he had built, his name, his work, his life, it was slipping away. And he had no idea why. Upstairs, as he quickly changed, his hands trembled uncontrollably. 8.5 million. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Then suddenly, one thought hit him. Elijah. He grabbed his phone and dialed. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. "Yeah." Elijah's voice came through, slightly breathless. Asher swallowed hard. "Brother, I'm being arrested. Brother, I'm being arrested. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Not long, just enough to feel wrong. What? Elijah said finally, his voice rising. Arrested? For what? They're saying I took money from the project, $8.5 million. Another pause. Then Elijah let out a sharp breath. That's insane. No, that's not possible. You'd never do that. I know, Asher said, his voice tightening. They're here right now. They have a warrant. Listen to me, Elijah said quickly, his tone shifting into something firm, controlled. Don't say anything without a lawyer. I'll start checking everything on my end. There has to be a mistake, or someone's setting you up. Asher closed his eyes for a second. That word again. Setting you up. Please, Asher said quietly. I need you on this. You've got me, Elijah replied. Always. The call ended. For a moment, Asher just stood there, staring at his reflection in the mirror. But this time, he didn't recognize the man looking back. When he came downstairs, Claire was already waiting, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The detective stood by the door, patient but unmoving. Asher walked toward her. I'm going to fix this, he said softly. She stepped forward and held him, gripping his shirt like she was afraid he might disappear. You will. You always fix things. He wanted to believe that. He really did. But something deep inside him, something quiet and cold, whispered that this wasn't something he could fix alone. The ride to the station felt longer than it actually was. The city passed by in silence. Buildings he had helped create. Streets he had walked 1,000 times. Everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. His hands rested in his lap, cuffed, heavy. He kept replaying everything in his head. The contracts. The signatures. The documents Elijah had handed him. The ones he signed without hesitation. Because he trusted him. At the station, everything moved quickly. Too quickly. Photos. Fingerprints. Cold instructions spoken in flat voices. He sat in a small room across from Detective Santos, the air thick and suffocating. Mr. Donovan, Santos said, opening a file, we've traced multiple financial transfers from company accounts to private holdings under your authorization. That's not true, Asher replied immediately. I don't handle direct transfers. That's managed through internal accounting. Santos slid a document across the table. Then explain this. Asher picked it up. His name. His signature. Clear. Precise. Perfect. But his stomach dropped instantly. I didn't sign this. Santos leaned back slightly. That's your signature. Asher shook his head, his grip tightening on the paper. It looks like mine, but I didn't sign this document. You expect me to believe someone just copied your signature perfectly? Santos asked, his tone calm but edged. Asher looked up, his voice low now. Yes, because it was the only truth he had. The questioning went on for hours. Every answer he gave felt like it was disappearing into a wall of doubt. Every explanation sounded weaker the more he repeated it. By the time they finally led him to a cell, his head felt heavy, like it couldn't hold another thought. The door shut behind him with a hard metallic echo. And just like that, everything he had built was gone. He sat down slowly on the cold bench, his back against the wall. 2 other men were already there, barely glancing at him. To them, he was just another man who got caught. But Asher knew the truth. He hadn't stolen anything, which meant someone else had, and they had made sure every finger pointed at him. Hours passed, maybe longer. Time didn't feel real anymore. All he could think about was Claire. And Elijah. Claire, who believed in him. Elijah, who promised to find the truth. That thought, it was the only thing keeping him steady. Later that afternoon, a guard called his name. Visitor. Asher stood up quickly, his heart jumping. When he walked into the visiting area, Claire was already there. Her eyes were red. Her face pale. The moment she saw him, she stood up and rushed forward. "Oh my God," she whispered, holding his hands tightly. "What are they doing to you?" Asher tried to stay strong, but seeing her like that, it broke something inside him. "They think I stole from the project," he said. "They have documents, signatures." "That's ridiculous," she said immediately. "You would never do that." "I know," he replied, his voice barely steady. "But they think I did." She squeezed his hands harder. "I've already contacted a lawyer. The best one I could find. We're going to fight this." Asher nodded slowly. Then he asked the question that mattered most. "Elijah." Claire took a breath. "He's been at the office all morning, going through every record, every transaction. He said he's going to figure out who did this." Asher looked down for a moment. A small sense of relief washed over him. That was Elijah. That was his brother. "I knew I could count on him," Asher said quietly. Claire gave a faint smile. "You always could." The visit ended too soon. It always does. Asher watched her walk away, her shoulders tense, her steps slow. Then he was led back to the cell. Back to the silence. Back to the weight pressing down on his chest. That night, he barely slept. Every sound echoed. Every thought circled back. And somewhere in the middle of that darkness, a realization began to take shape. Not clear. Not complete. But enough to make his chest tighten again. Because if someone had forged his signature, if someone had access to everything, then it wasn't just anyone. It had to be someone close. Someone who knew exactly how he worked. Someone he trusted. Asher slowly opened his eyes in the dim light. And for the first time, that quiet doubt inside him started to grow into something much more dangerous. That quiet doubt inside him. It didn't leave. It stayed there, sitting heavy in his chest, growing with every passing hour. The next day, the air inside the cell felt even colder. Asher sat with his back against the wall, staring at the floor, replaying everything again, but this time, slower. More carefully. Every detail. Every signature. Every document Elijah had handed him. He could see it clearly now. The black folder. The stack of papers. Just standard forms, Elijah had said. Asher had barely skimmed them. Because he trusted him. His jaw tightened. Trust. That word didn't feel the same anymore. By afternoon, another visitor came. Elijah. The moment Asher saw him step into the room, something inside him loosened. Just a little. Elijah looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. His usual confident energy. Gone. "Brother," Elijah said, sitting down across from him. "I've been digging through everything." Asher leaned forward slightly. "And?" Elijah exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were doing. Asher didn't blink. "You think it's someone inside?" "It has to be," Elijah said. "No outsider could access this level of detail. Your signature patterns, internal approvals, account structures. This wasn't random." The words hit exactly where Asher's thoughts had already gone. "Do you suspect anyone?" Asher asked. Elijah hesitated. Just for a second. Too quick to notice, unless you were looking for it. "I don't want to point fingers yet," he said carefully. "But I'm checking everyone. every employee, every transaction. Asher studied his face. For years, he had known every expression Elijah made, every shift in tone, every pause. And now he was trying to read him like a stranger. "I need the truth," Asher said quietly, "no matter how ugly it is." Elijah met his eyes. "You'll get it," he said firmly. "I'm not letting you take the fall for something you didn't do." Asher nodded slowly. He wanted to believe him. He needed to believe him. Because if he didn't, then there would be nothing left to hold on to. That night, the doubt came back stronger. It didn't accuse. It didn't shout. It just whispered. Soft. Persistent. What if? What if the person who did this was closer than you think? Asher shut his eyes tightly, trying to push the thought away. No. Not Elijah. Not Claire. Not the two people who stood by him. That kind of betrayal. It didn't just happen. Or at least, that's what he kept telling himself. Days passed. The case moved forward faster than he expected. Too fast. The media picked it up. His name was everywhere. Respected businessman. $1 million fraud. Housing project scandal. Every headline felt like a knife. When they brought him into court for the first hearing, the weight of it all became real. People filled the room. Some curious. Some judging. Some already convinced he was guilty. Asher kept his eyes forward, refusing to look around too much. Because he knew. Once he saw the way people looked at him, it would break something inside him. At the front row, Claire sat still, her hands tightly clasped together. Beside her, Elijah. Both of them looked tense, worried, supportive. Exactly how they should look. And yet, that doubt didn't leave. "Mr. Asher Donovan," the judge said, his voice steady, "you are being charged with financial misconduct involving public funds. How do you plead?" Asher lifted his head. His voice came out clear. "Not guilty." There was a slight murmur in the room. The prosecutor stood, adjusting his glasses. "Your Honor, we have documented financial transfers authorized under the defendant's identity, along with discrepancies in construction materials used on the Horizon Complex project." Asher felt his chest tighten. There it was again. The materials. The cracks. The weak cement. Everything that didn't feel right. Now it was evidence. Evidence against him. His lawyer stepped forward. "Your Honor, my client has no direct involvement in financial handling. These transactions could have been manipulated. Could have been. Not proven. Not yet." The judge listened carefully, then spoke. "Given the seriousness of the charges, bail is denied." The words landed like a hammer. Denied. Asher didn't react right away. It took a second for it to sink in. He wasn't going home. Not today. Maybe not any time soon. He turned his head slightly. Claire's face had gone pale. Elijah's jaw was clenched tight. Asher looked at them both. And for a brief moment, something felt off. Not wrong enough to name, but not right enough to ignore. That night, back in his cell, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. Everything felt like it was slipping through his fingers. His life. His name. His future. And the worst part, he still didn't know who had done it. Or why. He leaned back slowly, resting his head against the cold wall. And finally, he let the thought come back. Clear this time. No hesitation. If someone this close had betrayed him, then the truth wasn't just dangerous. It was going to destroy him. And deep down, he was starting to fear. He might not be ready for it. He might not be ready for it. That thought stayed with him through the night, and into the next morning. Sleep barely came. And when it did, it wasn't rest, it was fragments. Broken memories. Faces that blurred between trust and suspicion. When Asher opened his eyes again, the gray light leaking into the cell made everything feel heavier. The truth was out there. Somewhere close. And it was closing in. Later that day, Elijah came back. He looked worse than before. Tired. On edge. Like he hadn't stopped moving since the arrest. "I've been going through everything again," Elijah said, sitting down. His voice was lower now, more controlled. "There are transfers I can't explain. Accounts layered under fake approvals. It's deep." Asher didn't respond right away. He just watched him. There was something different. Subtle. Almost invisible. But it was there. "You said you'd find out who did this," Asher finally said. "I will," Elijah replied quickly. "I'm close." Close. That word echoed strangely. "How close?" Asher asked. Elijah hesitated again. "Not long. Just enough. I think whoever did this had access to your signature files," he said carefully. "Digital copies. Internal records. Things only a few people could get to." Asher leaned forward slightly. "How many people?" Elijah looked at him. "Not many." The silence stretched between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Asher's heartbeat slowed, then picked up again. Because now the circle was getting smaller. Too small. "Elijah," Asher said quietly, "you've had access to everything too." The words didn't come out accusing. Just honest. Just real. But they landed heavy. Elijah's eyes flickered for a split second. Then he shook his head, almost offended. "You think I'd do that to you?" Asher held his gaze. "I don't know what to think anymore." That was the truth. Raw. Unfiltered. Elijah leaned back slightly, exhaling. "We've been through everything together. You really think I'd throw all of that away?" Asher didn't answer. Because the answer wasn't clear anymore. After a moment, Elijah leaned forward again, his tone softer now. "Look, I get it. You're under pressure. Anyone would be. But don't start doubting the people who are actually trying to help you." That hit. Harder than expected. Because maybe he was right. Maybe this was just fear talking. Maybe this was what desperation did. It made you question everything. "I'm sorry," Asher said quietly. "I didn't mean." "It's fine," Elijah cut in. "Just don't go down that road. It won't help you." Asher nodded slowly. But something inside him didn't settle. It stayed restless. Unresolved. That night, the noise in the cell felt louder. Voices. Footsteps. Metal clanking. But none of it mattered. Because the real noise was in his head. Every moment replaying. Every detail shifting. And then, something clicked. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. Those documents. The ones Elijah brought him. The ones he signed without reading. Why had they been so urgent? Why that day? Why that timing? Asher sat up slowly, his breath tightening. Because suddenly, it didn't feel like coincidence anymore. The next morning, court resumed. The room felt heavier than before. More people. More eyes. More judgment. Asher walked in, trying to stay steady, but inside, everything felt like it was unraveling. Claire was there again. Dressed in black this time. Her face pale, eyes tired. She looked at him the same way she always did. With concern. With support. With love. Or at least, what looked like love. Asher held her gaze for a moment longer than usual. Searching. Looking for something. anything. But all he saw was the same woman he had trusted with his life. Beside her, Elijah sat still, focused, watching everything. The hearing moved forward. More evidence. More numbers. More pressure. The prosecutor laid everything out like it was already decided. Transfers. Signatures. Material discrepancies. Everything tied back to him. And every time, Asher felt the walls closing in tighter. His lawyer pushed back where he could, pointed out gaps, raised doubts. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Then came something that made Asher's chest tighten again. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, we also have evidence showing that the materials used in construction were below standard, despite full payment being recorded. The judge looked at the documents. And this connects to the defendant how? These approvals, the prosecutor replied, holding up papers, were signed under Mr. Donovan's authority. Asher felt the weight hit again. Those papers. The same ones. Signed without question. Because he trusted. He stopped the thought. Because now. That trust felt like a weapon used against him. The hearing paused briefly. People shifted in their seats. Whispers filled the room. Asher turned slightly again. Claire wiped her eyes. Elijah leaned forward, speaking softly to her, comforting her, reassuring her. It looked real. It felt real. And yet, that quiet voice inside him spoke again. What if it is real? For them, just not for you. Asher looked away, because that thought, it hurt more than anything else. The hearing resumed. More arguments. More tension. And as the day moved forward, Asher could feel it. Something was building. Something he couldn't see yet. But it was coming. And whatever it wasn't going to be small. Because somewhere beyond those courtroom walls, the truth was getting closer. And when it finally showed itself, it wouldn't just set him free. It would tear everything apart. And Asher was beginning to understand that some truths don't just break your world. They show you. It was never real to begin with. It was never real to begin with. That thought didn't leave him. It followed him back to the cell, sat beside him in the silence, and whispered every time he tried to close his eyes. If the truth was coming, it was coming from somewhere close. Too close. The next visit didn't come until the following evening. Claire. She walked in slower this time. Not rushing. Not panicking. Just quiet. When she sat down, she didn't reach for his hands right away. That alone felt strange. You look tired, she said softly. Asher gave a faint nod. Not sleeping much. She looked down for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. This is all so overwhelming. It is, he replied. There was a pause. Longer than usual. And in that pause, something felt different. Not broken. But not the same either. Claire, Asher said gently, have you noticed anything strange lately? Before all this. She looked up quickly. What do you mean? At the office, the project, anything that didn't feel right. Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. Then she shook her head. No. Everything seemed normal. Normal. That word didn't sit right anymore. Asher studied her face. For years, he had known every expression she made. The way her eyes softened when she smiled. The way her voice dropped when she was serious. But now he felt like he was looking at someone through glass. Close. But not fully clear. You're sure? He asked quietly. Claire nodded. Asher, why are you asking like that? He hesitated. Because the truth was, he didn't know how to ask what he was really thinking. How do you look at the person you love and question if they're part of your downfall? I just need to understand what's happening, he said finally. Claire reached forward then, placing her hand over his. You will, she said softly. This will pass. We'll get through it. That word should have felt comforting, but something about it felt hollow. The visit ended shortly after, and as she stood to leave, she leaned in slightly, brushing a light kiss against his cheek, the same way she always did. Familiar, gentle. But Asher didn't feel the same warmth this time. He watched her walk away, and for the first time, he didn't feel reassured. That night, the doubt stopped whispering. It started speaking clearly. Not loud, but certain. Something is wrong. The next morning came with a strange stillness. No visits. No interruptions. Just time. Too much time to think. Asher sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped together, his mind moving through every moment again. But this time, he wasn't looking at what happened. He was looking at who was there. Elijah. Claire. Always there. Always close. Always involved. Too involved. His breathing slowed. Because now, the pattern wasn't random anymore. It was precise. And then something else surfaced. A memory. Small. Almost forgotten. Elijah placing those documents in front of him. Claire calling him right after the contract was signed. Her voice excited. But also rushed. Why had that moment felt so important to her? Why had Elijah needed those signatures so urgently? Asher stood up slowly, his heart beginning to pound again. Because now, it wasn't just doubt. It was direction. Later that day, Elijah returned. This time, he walked in faster. More energy. More urgency. I found something, he said, sitting down quickly. Asher didn't react immediately. He just watched him. What is it? He asked. Elijah leaned forward. There are accounts offshore, hidden under layers of fake approvals. The money didn't just disappear. It was moved. To where? Elijah hesitated. Again. That same hesitation. Short. Controlled. But there. I'm still tracing it, he said. But I'm close. Close. Again. Asher leaned back slightly, his eyes still locked on him. Elijah, look at me. Elijah paused. Then he did. You said only a few people could access everything needed to do this, Asher continued. You. Me. Maybe one or two others. Elijah nodded slowly. Yeah. So why does it feel like we're going in circles? Asher asked. There was no anger in his voice. Just something deeper. Something heavier. Elijah exhaled, leaning back. Because whoever did this covered their tracks well. That's not what I asked. Silence. The air between them shifted. Something unspoken, now hanging right there in front of them. Elijah, Asher said quietly, if you know something, tell me. Elijah's jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might say something. Something real. Something that would finally make sense of everything. But then he shook his head. I don't have proof yet, he said. And without proof, it doesn't matter. Asher nodded slowly. But inside, something sank. Because that answer didn't feel like truth. It felt like delay. And delay only helped one kind of person. The one hiding something. When Elijah stood to leave, he placed a hand on the table. I'm going to fix this, he said. Asher looked up at him. And for the first time, he didn't know if that promise meant safety, or something else entirely. After Elijah left, Asher sat there for a long time. Not moving. Not thinking. just feeling. And what he felt wasn't confusion anymore. It was clarity, trying to break through. Because the truth wasn't far now. It was right there. Just one step away. And deep down, Asher knew. The next time he looked at the people he trusted most, he wouldn't be looking for comfort anymore. He'd be looking for the truth. Even if it destroyed everything he had left. Even if it destroyed everything he had left. The next court date came faster than expected. And this time, it felt different. Not louder. Not more crowded. But heavier. Like the room itself knew something was about to change. Asher stood there, hands steady but heart pounding deep in his chest. He didn't look around much this time. He didn't search for comfort. He didn't search for reassurance. Because now, he wasn't here to hope. He was here to face the truth. Claire sat in the front row again. Elegant. Composed. Her eyes met his, and for a moment she gave him that same soft look she always had. But Asher didn't hold on to it. Not anymore. Beside her, Elijah sat still, watching everything closely. Too closely. Judge Palmer adjusted his glasses, flipping through the final documents. "The court has reviewed all evidence," he began, his voice calm, controlled. "Financial records, material discrepancies, witness testimonies." Each word pressed down harder. Asher's breath slowed. This was it. This court finds that. The doors burst open. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a crack of thunder. Two small figures rushed inside, slipping past the guards before anyone could react. "He's innocent." The voice was sharp, desperate, but filled with something pure. Asher turned. Two little girls. Dirty clothes. Bare feet. Hair tangled from days on the street. And in one of their small hands, a broken phone. "We have proof," the other shouted, holding it up like it was the most important thing in the world. The courtroom froze. Confused murmurs spread. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order. What is the meaning of this?" The girls didn't stop. They ran forward, their tiny steps echoing against the polished floor, determination stronger than fear. "He didn't do it," one of them cried, pointing straight at Asher. "He's the good man." Asher's chest tightened. He recognized them. The girls from the street. The ones he had helped without thinking twice. The ones who looked at him like he mattered. "Your Honor," his lawyer said quickly, stepping forward, "we should hear them." The prosecutor shook his head. "This is absurd." "We heard them talking," the girl interrupted, her voice trembling but strong. "The bad people. We recorded it." Silence fell. Real silence. The kind that holds something inside it. The phone was taken carefully and connected. The screen flickered. The audio started. At first, just soft noises. Children laughing. Movement. Then footsteps. Voices. Clear. Cold. Everything's going according to plan. Asher's heart stopped. He knew that voice. Perfect. He signed everything without even checking. The second voice. Familiar. Too familiar. Just a few more transfers, and we're done. Then, a laugh. Light. Cruel. "I almost feel bad for him," the woman said. 5 years pretending I care, and he never suspected a thing." The room exploded into whispers. Asher felt his knees weaken. Because that voice was Claire's. "And that's why it worked," Elijah added, his voice calm, confident. "He trusts us both completely." That was it. No more doubt. No more confusion. Just truth. Raw. Unforgiving. Asher's world didn't shatter in that moment. It didn't break. It went silent. Because the pain was too deep for noise. Judge Palmer slammed the gavel again. Order! Experts moved quickly, confirming the recording. Authentic. Unedited. Real. Claire Donovan. Elijah Crane, the judge said firmly. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and perjury. Guards moved in. Claire's face drained of color, her composure collapsing in seconds. This isn't what it looks like. But her voice shook, because it was exactly what it looked like. Elijah didn't speak. For the first time, he had nothing to say. Asher stood there, watching them. Not with anger. Not with rage. But with something quieter. Something deeper. Understanding. 15 years of friendship. 5 years of marriage. All built on something that was never real. And yet, he didn't feel empty. Because standing right there were 2 little girls. Poor. Hungry. Forgotten by the world. But carrying more truth, more courage, than anyone else in that room. Asher slowly walked toward them. Knelt down. His voice breaking for the first time. You saved me. The girls looked at him, unsure, but smiling softly. We just showed what we had, one of them said. No, Asher whispered. You gave me my life back. Tears filled his eyes. Not from loss, but from something else. Something stronger. Relief. Gratitude. Faith. Because in a world where he had been betrayed by the people he loved most, he had been saved by 2 children who had nothing. And in that moment, he understood something that no amount of money could ever teach him. The emotional peak hit him quietly, but deeply. The ones with nothing gave me everything I thought I had lost. Weeks later, Asher stood outside a small home. Not a mansion. Not something extravagant. Just warm. Simple. Real. Inside, laughter echoed. The girls ran across the room, their faces clean now, their clothes new, their eyes still carrying that same light. Are you coming? One of them called. Asher smiled, stepping inside. He wasn't alone anymore. He didn't have the life he once thought mattered. He had something better. Something honest. Something earned through pain and rebuilt with love. Because in the end, wealth can build houses, but only kindness builds a home. And sometimes, the people the world forgets are the ones sent to remind us what truly matters. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.